CF Moto, cheap Chinese rubbish or exactly what the market needs? Let's chat about it. What's up, ladies and gents? You join me on a fairly dreary weekday evening. I've been thinking quite a lot about the state of the motorbike market at the moment, and in particular the influx, or what seems like an influx, in Chinese manufacturers such as CF Moto. Now, this video isn't going to be particularly factual. This is just me chatting. So, CF Moto massively stigmatized for being Chinese, which I think there's a huge irony in, really, because most things in our day-to-day lives, most machines that we interact with, pieces of technology that we rely on so heavily, they're all made in China. It's really funny, like, you'll see an article about CF Moto on Facebook or whatever, and all the comments will be slating about how it's Chinese rubbish, but the great irony in that is that people posting those comments are probably posting them on iPhones that are made in China. They're just much more likely to have trust in a product that has a Western middleman. When it comes to Chinese manufacturing of vehicles, like cars, motorbikes, how long are they going to need their Western middlemen? Because as time goes on, what it seems like is slowly but surely these manufacturers are outsourcing, lots of components are manufactured to other countries like China. It's only going to be a matter of time before China has the data from R&D and stuff that they need to just cut them out and just sell directly to the West. And I think that's what we're seeing with brands like CF Moto. Here in the UK you see it a lot with cars as well. There's all sorts of Chinese brands. What's piqued my interest about CF Moto in particular at the moment is that it's very clear that they are just making bikes that are just completely different to the big four Japanese manufacturers, which is really interesting because the big four being, Honda, Kawasaki, Suzuki and Yamaha. I don't know if I'm allowed through it. I shouldn't have gone this way. The big four have been on top for a really long time. You can see that as well. You can see some complacency in terms of the development of new bikes and tech, and also, in my opinion, what is just greedy prices on some bikes. Like, you take the Honda CRF 300 Rally, for instance. That's like such a basic bike, but it's so criminally expensive in my opinion. The same with like the new DRZ and stuff. They're just so expensive, and honestly I don't really know how they're getting away with it. So us as consumers, exactly what we need is for some new companies to swoop in, make very, very appealing bikes for not very much money to compete. In the past, brands like CF Moto and Chinese manufacturers on the whole, in the early days, like 5-6 years ago, a lot of them were just cloned engines in very sort of universal style chassis. We saw that a lot in the UK with CBT bikes, be it 50s and 125s. When I started riding about 10 years ago, every other 50 or 125 was Chinese, and they all had just like air-cooled Honda clone engines. And CF Moto were doing that for a time. I think they still are, actually. With the 650 engines, I think, are licensed by Kawasaki, so they are not an original engine. But the big transition that we're seeing now, with CF Moto in particular, is that they are starting to manufacture their own unique platforms, and there's actually quite a few of them. So you've got the 450 platform, which is a 270-degree parallel twin, but in a nice small compact engine size, compliant for the A2 market and stuff. And then you've also got that same engine in a small A2 super sport bike. Can't remember what that's called, the SS, I think. And then they've also got some really off-the-wall stuff, like the 675 3-cylinder engine. There's rumours that that engine is a reverse-engineered Triumph unit, which would make a lot of sense. But we'll see. And also they've got the 500cc inline 4 engine. They're just doing really off-the-wall things, which I think is exactly what the market needs. And there's been many reports of the bikes being decent and reliable. So I think what CF Moto are doing is really exciting, and the prices, you cannot argue with them. That's a huge cutting of the corner there, mate. Good thing I wasn't right there. Oh, had to get out of the way then. So I went riding down this byway for the first time riding the Grom off-road the other day, and now I'm back, still on standard tyres, and it's going to be a bit wetter and a bit shittier this time. So this ought to be fun. What's piqued my interest, I'll be honest, because me as a consumer, I sort of wrote off Chinese bikes a really long time ago. I thought that they were destined to just be sort of cheap copies, really, that weren't particularly high quality, weren't particularly innovative, but they had their place in the market because they provided a bike that had a really, really cheap entry point. So for a Chinese manufacturer to have piqued my interest, it means that something must have changed, because previously, you know, they hadn't. So for instance, the bike that's caught my attention is the 450 MT. That has that engine that I was just talking about, the 270-degree crank 450. So that bike in particular provides a proposition that doesn't really exist in the market right now. You can't get an adventure bike with a 270-degree crank engine that is that small. So it's essentially like a mini Tenere 700, but it's significantly cheaper. So they're like £5,700, and I think the CRF Rally, which is a much simpler bike, doesn't have sort of half the technology, is, you know, a couple of grand more, I think, which is just friggin' mental. I've thought about the inherent ethical issues with Chinese manufacturers, in particular in terms of labour and stuff. And to be honest, I can't really comment on the political side of that, because I just don't understand it well enough to know. So I can't form a well-informed opinion, so I'm not going to bother. But what I would say is that, you know, how many people query the ethical issues of their iPhones, or their toasters, or their ovens, or the litany of technology that we rely on that's made in China? And then you think about other manufacturers, what the big guys are doing. Most manufacturers have a significant lineup of bikes that aren't made in the country of origin of the manufacturer. For instance, you've got KTM making bikes in India. I know Yamaha makes their MT-07 and a few other bikes in Indonesia. This Grom is not made in Japan. I think it's made in Thailand. So much is made in China. It's just that a lot of the time there's Western middlemen that are rebadging the stuff or rebranding it, because consumers have more trust in these brands. But I don't think this is going to last forever. And as we see more of a cost of living problem in the West, you know, consumers are going to gravitate to cheaper products. We're not going to spend, let's go for this puddle, we're not going to be spending loads of money when there's, you know, market competition for stuff that's better on the spec sheet and significantly cheaper. We know how to make things reliable as a race. So I can't imagine that CF Moto are going to have many reliability issues at all. They've been making bikes for a long time, and, you know, a lot of these problems of like metallurgy or whatever, electronics, all these things, they've been figured out. So the reason why Japanese brands had so much sway was because, you know, they solved the reliability problem that the British bikes had. So the thing is, if Chinese manufacturers can make bikes that are just as reliable, they're babies, aren't they? Hello. Off-roading, boys. This is fun. Motorcycling is very similar to lots of sort of lifestyle things and hobbies, and they're rooted in tradition, and I'm guilty of it too. I'm not saying with this spiel that I'm above it, because I'm totally not. You know, if the 450 MT that I was referring to, if that had a Honda badge on it, it's going to sell twice as many, and I would be more likely to buy it because I'd know it's a proven product. You know, something being proven is important. We can't pretend it isn't. But I think it's just interesting to be aware of these biases that we have, and, you know, are they holding us back? Because they might be, you know? I don't know how wise it is to be hitting this byway at night, but we're just going to trundle along. I personally think that CF Moto, in particular out of the Chinese manufacturers, are going to be rising above, and they're going to become a big player, because you can just tell that they mean business with the amount of bikes that they're dropping and stuff. It's crazy, you know, all these new platforms, and the prices are just so competitive. The UK differs to the US, I think, a bit, where our consumers don't have the buying power that Americans have. So I think we're much more likely to gravitate to these better value brands. Noisy buggers. Can I come through, please? This turned into quite the adventure, hasn't it? Bikes like the Voyages as well, they offer phenomenal value. And I was looking around them at a dealer in Poole the other day, and there's no noticeable drop in quality in that versus like a Yamaha or anything like that, in my opinion, on the surface anyway. Just looking, you know, at the finishes of the materials, the hardware and things like that. Back in the day, it was so obvious that it was a Chinese bike because the hardware looked rubbish and the finishing kit was rubbish, but it's just not the case anymore. And in the case of like the Vogue 300 Rally, that bike is basically the same as a CRF 300 Rally, and it's half as much. And that is significant. That is so significant. When people are you know, struggling, when the working man and woman doesn't have much buying power, bikes like that are going to do alright, in my opinion. If they can prove themselves to be reliable and decent performing, then they're going to do really well. So I think the future holds many more Chinese motorbikes. Assuming something's bad just because it's Chinese is a really kind of dated way of thinking. Chances are a lot of the things that you own that you think are high quality are probably made in China. Some of them most certainly will be. So what do you guys think? I am going to try and get a test ride on a CF Moto and maybe the Vogue 300 as well, because I think it's quite a compelling option. I'm really interested in the lightweight adventure category, so I want to see what they're all like. I'm not saying I'm going to buy one either, I really want to know what they're like. With the way the economy is, particularly in the UK, I can only speak on the UK because it's where I live. People are sick of getting ripped off. I'm sick of getting ripped off. Everything's so expensive. It feels like you're getting price gouged constantly, and I'm just, yeah, super sick of it. So I'm not going to pay a premium price for something if there's a cheaper option, just out of tradition or nostalgia or something like that. The camera never does these bits justice. It just looks completely flat on camera. This is very steep at the moment. Like, if I let go of the brake, I'd be doing 30 mile an hour down here. I don't know how wise it is to be here late at night on my own, but this is what we're doing. Haven't put a foot down yet. We'll make it down this bit and then we'll wrap up the video. This is friggin' so fun. Alright, we didn't put a foot down. Ooh, 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 losing traction, losing traction. Oh, what a beautiful sight this is. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Chinese manufacturers, I think there is a lot to be excited about. I don't know if I'm sold on them yet. I've still got lots of questions. But what I do know is that new bikes coming out is exciting. Thank you guys for watching. Leave your opinion down in the comments. Let's get the conversation going. That's the whole point in this video. I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.